there's a man who's like, his body is inside its sand and he runs on clockwork, and like at no point are you like, this is silly and weird, and they don't explain it. At no point are they like, this is what happened to him in like a real way. I think they give a vague thing, but then they're like, all right, are we okay? Can we just accept this now? And you do. And that movie is, in my mind, one of my favorite superhero movies. It's got lots of monsters, lots of slime. My favorite director made it. It's got a fantastic cast.
I love that movie.
If you haven't seen the first Hellboy, please do yourself a favor and go watch that.
Cameron and I cannot recommend it enough.
Oh God, yeah. And like Hellboy 2: The Golden Army, definitely not as good. Still a fun movie. The new Hellboy that just came out is a bad movie, but is still a lot of fun. So I honestly recommend all three of them.
The 2019 Hellboy.
2019
for
Hellboy.
You people listening in 2020.
Yes.
And
2035.
Find stumbling across this on the internet with three listens.
Exactly, right. The Hellboy 2019 I actually thought was a fun movie. It's definitely not as good as the others, but it was fun. So that's my number 5 pick.
I won't argue. I really do. I just want to chime in a little bit. I do really like that movie. It definitely was right in that affected deeply by the X-Men Fantastic Four era films. If you can accept that, it's a fantastic movie. Yeah, and it's really good. I love the characterization is really good. It follows that whole logic behind it. I really felt I loved that movie when I was a kid. God. And Guillermo del Toro is also one of my all-time favorite directors, and he can do literally nothing wrong. Yeah. Every movie he's made is good. But
yes, like Hellboy does fall. I think it came out right around Daredevil, because I remember those being like right next to each other.
I remember lots of Red Superhero that year,
and they were like hell themed. And like when Hellboy came out, it was edgy for me because it had hell in the title, and I couldn't say that word. No. It was Heck Boy.
Heck Boy. H-E double hockey sticks boy.
But yeah, like it came out during that time, but I think it was the most like threw that out the window and was gonna be as silly and dumb as possible, like unapologetically about it. But yeah, my number 4 pick is Thor Ragnarok for pretty much the same reasons that Jake said. Thor Ragnarok is my favorite Marvel superhero movie. Yeah. Like that movie is amazing. When the first trailers that came out hyped it up so hard that when I went to see it in the theaters, I was certain that it wasn't going to live up to that, and it goddamn did it ever live up to that. Like that movie is fantastic. It's one of the only Marvel movies that I have seen multiple times in the theaters and then consistently have the urge to watch at home. Like I just love that movie. I love the 80s aesthetic, like the 80s fantasy sci-fi aesthetic. Yeah. Like the soundtrack, Jeff Goldblum playing me. Everything about that movie worked in my opinion, and I loved it. And it even got a giant monster fight at the end, which I was in love with.
Yes, it certainly adds points to everything.
Yes, Rupert points to everything. Watching Hulk fucking flip Fenris off of the waterfall at the edge of the world was a big deal for me.
So good.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot. I had a comment about it.
So my number 3, and by the way, this is what bumped Mask of the Phantasm off the list, is Logan. I had forgotten that movie happened.
Oh my God, I forgot about that movie.
And that, I think, is, like Jake had said, post-Watchmen was kind of like, okay, they've done the edgy superhero movie, the dark, edgy, miserable superhero movie, the best it will ever be done, and it never needs to be done again. And then Logan came out, and it completely, like, blew that theory away from me, and now Logan I think is the farthest we ever need to get to that line.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Logan, there's so many great things about that movie. I love the fact that it's more a Western than a superhero movie.
Absolutely.
I love that it takes place in the future, but it takes place in such a vague version of the future that I didn't even really notice it until the second time I saw it. Because there's all these little things. Like, they make reference to self-driving semi-trucks at one point, and it has one of the greatest, like, introduction to this is the future lines that I've ever, like, experienced, where the villain is talking to Logan about having, slashed this car. And he goes, there were claw marks in the metal of the car which means that it was either attacked by you, Freddy Krueger, or a tiger, and it has to be you because one of them is a fictional character and the other one's extinct. And I remember, like, when I first actually heard and listened to that line, I was like, oh my God, that was brilliant. Like, that was a brilliant way to say, like, we're in the future without, like, really pushing that we're in the future. If you're listening to this in 2030, tigers aren't extinct yet when we're filming it.
Yes, that hasn't happened yet.
By the time this gets heard, it's possible that tigers will be extinct, but right now tigers are very real.
I have seen them with my eyeballs.
I've looked at a tiger. But, yeah, so Logan is way up there. In terms of characterization, do not consider myself a Wolverine fan. I was under the impression before Logan that Wolverine was what was ruining the X-Men movies because it all had to be about Wolverine. And I was so sick to death of seeing Wolverine. And that movie, like, completely wiped that away. Like, that was the perfect send-off to not only the character, but to Hugh Jackman, who had been portraying that character for so many years. I could not think of a more perfect swan song that an actor has been given for, like, this character that they have portrayed and, like, built, essentially. Like, when I picture Wolverine, I don't picture the yellow suit with the big pointy ears. I picture Hugh Jackman with no shirt and the claws. And so, like, that movie was just... Both? Yeah. And X-23 is so good. Like, the little girl that plays X-23 did such a great job. She did. Everything about that movie is fantastic. Once again, if you haven't seen it, please go watch that.
If I had remembered, that might have been on my list.
Yeah.
But I did not remember.
Number 2 for me is Into the Spider-Verse. Same reasons Jake said. It's visually stunning. It understands its characters in a way that, like, no movie has prior. I knew nothing about, like, the extended Spider-Verse other than, like, I knew that Miles Morales was a thing. I never read the Ultimate stuff, really, when I was still, like, reading comic books, and so I had never really experienced any Miles stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I knew Spider-Gwen because Jake complained about Spider-Gwen before the movie came out. And so I was aware that Spider-Gwen existed. And I remember I was distinctly not that excited to see Spider-Verse because I was like, it was a concept in Spider-Man that I wasn't super familiar with. When I saw the designs of the villains, I wasn't in love with it. I was like, I don't like what they did to the Green Goblin. I didn't really get it, I think, when we were going into it. And then I remember what made me decide I was going to go see it was that Nick Cage was Spider-Man Noir, and I thought that was a funny concept. And then, like, that movie blew me away. Like, going into it, I was immediately, from the first few seconds, like, visually just, like, overstimulated and so into it. Like, that movie sucks you into its world faster than any other movie. Like,
oh, yeah. They did comic booky things with it, and that's part of what, like, those intros, like, oh, you know my story, I'm Spider-Man.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
That was brilliant, and it was very comic booky.
Yeah, and I've heard people say since that, like, in a post-Spider-Verse world, seeing superhero movies in live action just seems disappointing. And in a way,
it is.
It kind of is, because now that you've seen it where they have the differing art styles for the different characters, you get the thought bubbles and the little, like, location description bubbles and stuff.
What I'm personally excited for is in the future when they do make more Spider-Verse movies.
Oh God, yeah.
And then they bring up a character and they put it in the bottom. First appeared in Spider-Verse.
Yes, that would be amazing.
And they can put little notes I'd like the writers.
Excelsior.
Excelsior? Oh.
Yes, I'm all about that.
Yes, but you were saying.
But yeah, Spider-Verse, I think, is, with me, what Jake said about Deadpool 2, where it's the superhero movie that most understands comic books and superheroes in general. And so that's my number 2. That is an amazing movie.
100%.
And my number 1 is Watchmen, because that is a movie that for me was like, that movie hit right after The Dark Knight. It was in that space between The Dark Knight and Iron Man 2, where, like, I saw the trailer for it when I went to go see The Dark Knight, and then I read the comic in between those two things. And for those that don't know, Watchmen is essentially the plot of The Incredibles, but much darker.
Very dark.
Very much darker. It's the idea is that...
That's actually a really good comparison, and I never thought of that before.
Really? I thought I had brought up to you that The Incredibles is essentially just Watchmen. So, like, the plot of it is that in the 60s and 70s, superheroes were a huge deal. It was 40s. Mostly masked vigilantes. Nobody really had superpowers in like the original time. It was just people in costumes going out and do-gooding, sort of. And there was a team that called themselves the Watchmen. And as time went on, it just more and more came out about them, and things got darker. Darker individuals entered the scene, sort of like using the guise of the masked vigilante to do more bad than good, sort of. And then when it gets to the 80s, it's such a big problem, and now there is a superhero. There's a man named Dr. Manhattan who has essentially was blown up in some like radiation experiment and managed to rebuild himself from at the particle level, like the atom level, rebuild his entire being, and now is essentially a god among men. The whole plot of it is that in the 80s they banned masked vigilantes. Some of them went into hiding and just went on to live normal lives, and there's a couple of them that are still active on the run from illegally. The law. Yeah, illegally. And so the plot of it is that it's in the 80s, like the late 80s, and one of the people who's continued to be a masked vigilante passed when it's accepted. Rorschach, who is an absolute lunatic and everyone knows is a crazy person, has uncovered this grand conspiracy to kill off the remaining masked vigilantes and is attempting to sort of like stir his fellow retired vigilantes back into action. And so the team you end up with it's Rorschach, who's this crazy like right-wing conspiracy theorist, and he back in 2009 when
it was okay
Obama was still the president, and like that wasn't horrifying as much yet. It was like a fantasy sort of thing.
So like living quite firmly in the time we do.
Yes.
This was for back then very different
circumstances. And they're doing a new Watchmen show for HBO this year.
It's about in the present day.
And it takes place more or less in their version of the present day, and it seems like it's going to deal with the way that viewing Rorschach is different now than it was then. But at the time, Rorschach, and even then, he's not like
something a character. To look up
you really look up to. He is a crazy person. He's violent. He hurts people. But there are other characters who you do. Like Night Owl is the main one who is just like not in it for himself, is just really a genuinely nice person who wants to help people. But now he's just this like schlubby 40-year-old dude hanging out on his couch and living this very unfulfilling life. And so when Rorschach comes to him and says, like, we need to get back into our costumes, there's someone trying to kill the old superheroes, he equal parts doesn't want to do it and wants to do it. Like, he does want that feeling of power back, but at the same time, he doesn't want to relive the danger of it almost. Like the sensible part of him doesn't want to do it anymore. And there's other characters. I don't want to impart the entirety of Watchmen onto people, but like that's the basic idea, is that the people who were retired are now having to come out of retirement to face this new threat, and are having to do so more or less against the law itself. And the movie of Watchmen is more or less a panel for panel reconstruction of the comic.
It's like very, especially like, I guess it's near impossible to watch the theatrical cut version nowadays. But
yeah, don't watch the theatrical cut version. Watch the director's cut version. And if you read the comic first and you love the comic exactly how it is, watch the ultimate cut, which is like 4 hours long.
And they have the pirate comic.
Yeah, the pirate comic, which is just if you've read it, you know what we're talking about. The pirate comic they animated that, and they inserted the animated segments where they pop up in the comic.
And it's literally just the whole novel, visual novel.
The whole comic, essentially,
and then put into a thing.
Yeah, and a lot of people criticize that movie. Like apparently it's considered like a notoriously bad adaptation.
Yes,
which part of me understands, because Watchmen the comic does make a point of like, Night Owl is he's overweight and he's kind of like a nerd, and he's like this big loser sort of, and when he puts his costume on he kind of looks silly, because now he like, it almost looks like a 60s Batman style costume, but more like owl themed instead of bat themed, and he kind of looks dumb in it now. But like, they don't throw a whole lot of punches in the comic. Like, it's not an action fighting comic. It's all about the history and the world and the characters. And in a 2009-2010 world when Watchmen was coming out, that wasn't what superhero movies were yet. No. And so it does crank up the violence a little bit. There's more fight scenes. Zack Snyder directed it. I like Zack Snyder. He's not a perfect director, but I do like his comic book movies more or less. And so you get that, like, slow-mo punches and stuff like that. And, like, in a way, that does date the movie, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The other thing people criticize is that they changed very, very, very... Like, they changed the ending, but they didn't change the ending in a way that negates the point. They just changed some of the circumstances that lead up to the ending. Like, the change in the ending is so...
It's both really big and very small.
Yeah, it's both really big and very small. It's really big in a way where you'd look at it and be like, that's definitely not what happened in the comics. But it's small in a way where it changes literally nothing. Like,
yeah, like you still get the same exact emotion and ending, and everyone's in the same spot at the end.
Yeah, and like the event
kind of makes a little bit more sense.
The event, just like the explanation of how it happened, is different, and it doesn't matter. I prefer the version that they did in the movie because the one in the comic was very convoluted.
Yeah.
And so anyway, Watchmen is my number one pick. It was when I saw it in the theaters when I was 15 years old. It was mind-blowing to me. The comic is amazing. The movie is amazing. Just great experience. Yes, and that's my favorite superhero movie.
Might be a very simplistic answer, but we're going to stick with it anyway.
Exactly.
It's like that for a reason.
Yeah.
Watchmen is good.
Watchmen is good. Watch Watchmen. And so now, very, very briefly...
Also, they weren't called the Watchmen. They were called the Minutemen.
Oh, you're right. They were called the Minutemen. That's right. I think they called them the Watchmen in the movie. In the movie, they called them the Watchmen because they want that to be...
I think they were still the Minutemen then. I don't know. I don't know. I don't remember.
Maybe the second version is called The Watchmen in the movie or something. I know that they used the title at some point.
They did.
Because
who watches The Watchmen?
Yeah, but in the trailer, which I've watched like a million times, Dan says Watchmen is over. Which is referencing so at some point they used that as the name of the team in the movie specifically. But anyway, so very briefly now, what, Jake, is the most... Well, you've actually... already got this, you motherfucker, last week. Your biggest pipe dream. Perfect comic book movie / show.
Here we go.
Jake got his.
Let me, I'm wearing suspenders and I'm doing the big slap of myself with the suspenders because I'm very proud of myself. So, alright. So today is August 30th, 2019. D23 was last week. And for those who don't know, in case they don't do it in the future, D23 is a big expo that Disney does once every 2 years or something. And they go over and they do this big thing and they talk about all the projects Disney's going to do. And I don't know if this is going to change in the future, but right now what Disney owns is all of Fox's properties, ESPN, Star Wars, Marvel, and of course the classic Disney stuff.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of shit that they got, and for years, I've been going. Well, not years. Oh, I guess years.
Years. Since the Daredevil Netflix show happened.
Yes, I was supposed to say. I think that because for me it wasn't that long ago, but it really was that long ago.
Yeah, we were in college.
Yeah. The Daredevil. So I was like, I want a Moon Knight show. I'm gonna get a Moon Knight show.
They gotta make Moon Knight next.
Moon Knight, he's the best. I'm gonna get Moon Knight, and I make fun of myself, but I unabashedly love Moon Knight. I think Moon Knight is fantastic. He's one of my absolute all-time favorite superheroes, and Cam is laughing, and he has every right to. Everyone has a right to. I
think Moon Knight is very fun.
And I just had a blast with him, and he's like kind of me and him got like our special moment, and we just I got to read his comics, and I just had a personal connection with him, and then all of a sudden, fucking D23 strolls in. We're like, we're gonna do a Moon Knight Disney Plus show.
So for the record, literally days before this announcement, Jake had in the group chat mentioned, I had made some salty comment about wanting them to be done with the Marvel movies for now so that I could have some time to rest. And Jake said, no, they have to run it into the ground so hard that they need to pull Moon Knight out and do a Moon Knight movie.
Very bottom of the barrel,
and get Moon Knight out. And I was like, oh my God, Jake, then they'll never end. And then days later, fucking Moon Knight confirmed, and I had to eat my shoes.
It was so good.
Yes.
Oh my God, I lost it. That last D23 was very, very crucial for me personally.
Yes, you got a lot out of that.
I got a lot out of that, which we will discuss in later times.
Yes. But for now,
we've been talking your ear off.
Most importantly, Moon Knight happened.
Yes, Moon Knight did happen, and now watch it was really bad, and like everyone in the future is like laughing at me extra hard now. A, for liking Moon Knight, and B, because I'm excited for this show that turned out really bad.
So other than Moon Knight,
all of Disney Plus just crashes, and it's just awful.
And
it's a big joke now.
It's like they didn't even do Moon Knight badly. It's just Moon Knight's that bad. Turns out everyone hates Moon Knight that much.
It's a perfect adaptation, and I'm like, it's so good, and then everybody hates it. Like, it's awful. All right, but yes. So,
other than Moon Knight, do you have a pipe dream comic book movie that you would love to see made?
Well, the one I had always mentioned is essentially, not always, but ever since there was an episode of one of the newer Spider-Man shows. I want to say the Spectacular Spider-Man, and don't quote me on that because it might not be. But there was an episode.
Hold on 1 second. All right, continue.
Okay. There's an episode where Spider-Man goes to Doctor Strange's house in New York, and he just like kind of hangs. He's like, I guess he's like watching the house for Doctor Strange, right? And then Moon Knight shows up, and like, Spider-Man
my God,
has never met or spoken to Moon Knight before. He like vaguely knows he's who Moon Knight is, and so he ends up trusting him. But like Moon Knight and they like just ramp up like Moon Knight to like 11, and he's just like, the moon is telling me to do things. And so everyone's like, can we not? Hold on, are you sure? Because that's just the moon. And he's like, no, the moon, it's telling me. Because like they didn't really want to go into Khonshu and all that, so like they just presented him as like the most wild.